think fewer than 4 meetings would work. And the reason why I think we need at least 4 meetings is that obviously we're going to hear from Government of Canada officials. Obviously, we're going to hear from Ukrainian government officials. And then I think we need to hear from stakeholders. Mr. Oliphant has suggested that we hear from the German and EU ambassador, which I'm supportive of doing, but we also need to hear from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, and we need to hear from broader foreign policy experts who can put this into a broader context about natural gas supplies to Germany. So I'm fine with striking how many meetings we need to have, provided that we are under the understanding that we have at least 4 meetings, and no fewer than that, and as many meetings as necessary to accommodate the witnesses that we believe we need to be hearing from. And so and the final thing I'll say on that, Mr. Chair, on the amendment in front of us is that I don't believe, and I know this is the 4th amendment, but I don't believe if we do strike how many meetings we're going to have, that does not imply that the witness list is restricted to the 6 witnesses that Mr. Oliphant has suggested. Mr. Oliphant has suggested that we hear from only 6 witnesses, those being the Minister of Natural Resources, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the Ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, the Ambassador of Germany to Canada, and the Ambassador of the European Union to Canada. I don't believe the witnesses should be restricted just to those 6 witnesses. I think we need to hear from witnesses beyond that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. Now we go to Mr. Jenness. Mr. Jenness, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am supportive of this motion. It's virtually identical to a motion that was put on notice by my colleague, Mr. Chong. I am concerned by what appears to be an effort by the government to, on the one hand, say yes to hearings, but on the other hand, effectively water down the ability of the committee to do the detailed work that is required. Look, we need to hear not just from government and from ambassadors, but also from civil society, from experts, from people that can inform our work from a more from a variety of different directions. And if you add up 3 ambassadors, 2 ministers, I don't, plus the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and other civil society groups and experts, I don't know how we would end up at less than 4 or 5 meetings, anyways. So I think happy to work with colleagues on refining the language of this motion. But the fundamental point is that we need to have enough meetings, summer or not, to deal with this critical issue. It might be our summer break, but there's no summer break for Ukrainians. There's no time off for people that are seeing their homes destroyed, that are seeing schools and hospitals targeted. This is a devastating war that we're seeing, the targeting of civilians and of children, the total lack of regard for human life, for international law, and for the rules of war that we're seeing from the Russian Federation. And Canada needs to do its part. And I believe that means opposing the logic of appeasement or compromise with this violent aggressor. My view when I saw this announcement from the government was that the government's decision to suspend their own sanctions is a slap in the face to the Ukrainian people in their darkest hour. And it made me wonder, what is the point of sanctions if the government is so casually willing to ignore or suspend their own rules every time somebody asks? This is happening in a context as well where, and I think it's important to note, the German chancellor has told Bloomberg, quote, "It would be good if they would be there even though they are not necessary." The German chancellor has said that the return of the turbines is not necessary. It's important that we are firm in our resolve. If we aren't, then Russia will simply continue to escalate their pressure. I note as well, the parliamentary secretary during his comments claimed that the return of these turbines will ensure European energy security. Nothing could be further from the truth. Returning turbines will not guarantee European energy security. It will only empower the Kremlin to control the energy supply, to intimidate Europe further, and to cut off energy supply at a time and in a way of their choosing. I hope that through these hearings and through the deliberations that the committee will undertake, we will be able to make the case to the government of the need to be resolute in standing with our Ukrainian allies and not to show weakness in the way that they have done by proposing to return these turbines, to suspend the sanctions regime that they have in the past trumpeted. Again, we need to be standing with our Ukrainian friends and allies during their darkest hour, summer or not, and that means taking the time to have the hearings that are required to get to the bottom of these issues, to hold the government accountable, and I'm certainly prepared to do that, and I hope that other members are as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennis. We next go to Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, welcome to the committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I prefer to arrive at my conclusions after I've heard the evidence. And I can't imagine that this is a simple or easy decision. As chair of the Defense Committee, I think there are significant NATO implications in the decision process. If we are establishing a witness list, I would like to hear from our NATO ambassador. And I think it's rather unprecedented that some of the most significant members of NATO have come out and supported the decision, which everyone would agree is a very difficult decision of the government of Canada to return the turbines. So I think that would be useful to the committee so that all of the evidence can be on the table. I don't have any firm views on the other than a sort of a general supportive notion of the amendments. I think they're helpful. I much prefer a committee that works constructively in the best interests of Canadians, and I think the motions put forward by Mr. Oliphant, along with the main motion of Ms. McPherson, are actually a real strong step in the right direction, and I support Mr. Genu's argument that we can certainly in the summertime deal with these kinds of things, because this is an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. We next go to Mr. Bizan. Mr. Bizan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we need to keep this rather open-ended, because I think as we dive into this, and this is another opportunity for Parliament to raise public awareness over the war in Ukraine. I think that we need to have a briefing on the current situation in Ukraine and making sure that we understand the ramifications of this rather embarrassing decision that the government made in returning these gas turbines to Gazprom. I think when you look at what happened again yesterday with an attack on civilians in downtown Vinnytsia, 23 more people killed, including I believe it was 3 or 4 children that were killed in that cruise missile attack. We need to put some understanding around how gas sales to Germany and other European nations fuel Putin's war machine. We need to understand that those revenues that are generated by Gazprom ultimately go back to the Russian military, which buys things like cruise missiles and other artillery, as well as the overall illegal invasion in Ukraine by the Russian Federation. I think we want to make sure that we cover all these bases, and restricting timelines, restricting the number of meetings, restricting the witness list through a motion, I don't believe is in our best interest or in the interests of Canada's foreign policy in Ukraine, and allowing both the government of Ukraine to express their concerns, as well as those in the diaspora here in Canada. I'd also just say that I think we've all seen the response from President Zelensky on this decision. To say that he's disappointed is an understatement. I think that there's anger. I think that Ukraine feels betrayed, regardless of the sanctions list that Mr. Oliphant already talked about, and an unprecedented number of people and organizations that have been placed on it. If we're going to suspend those sanctions on a temporary basis, then they mean nothing. So, Mr. Chair, I'd encourage all committee members to look at the bigger picture, ensure that we get everyone out there that's experts in the field to give us a full briefing so that we can make a proper decision, and that Canadians who have taken an interest in this, as well as the media, will be able to report on those facts.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. We next go to Mr. Bergeron.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.